This podcast is going to go through reading an operative report, with that being a coronary artery bypass procedure or a CABG. Our procedure is a patient undergoes an open coronary artery bypass graft surgery. Left internal mammary artery to the left anterior descending artery. Left radial artery graft from the aorta to the posterior descending artery, and the left greater saphenous vein graft from the aorta sequential to the diagonal to the obtuse marginal. Both the saphenous vein and radial artery grafts are harvested in separate incisions using a percutaneous endoscopic approach. So, what do we know so far? We know it's a bypass, so at least one of our root operations is bypass. What body system is it? Well, it's the coronary arteries, so it's the heart and great vessel body system. And what is the approach? Two approaches are mentioned, the open and the percutaneous endoscopic. So if we look at our guidelines, there are specific guidelines that directly address coronary artery bypasses. And what I've done here is break them out so you can see which character in our PCS code is directly impacted by this guideline. The first one talks about character number 4 is the body part, and that is the number of coronary arteries bypassed to. So you're not finding the name of the coronary artery that's been bypassed to, you're saying the number of coronary arteries bypassed to. And the qualifier, the 7th character, is the vessel bypassed from, which is the source of your blood. Where is that blood coming from? The second guideline is affecting both characters 6 and 7 that says if multiple coronary arteries are bypassed, which is not uncommon, it's pretty common actually, a separate procedure is coded for each coronary artery that uses a different device and or different qualifier. Device or whatever your grafts are, that's your device, and then qualifier is where the blood comes from. So you're looking at those two things. The next guideline, B3.9, says if an autograft is obtained from a different site in order to complete the objective of the procedure, that is a separate procedure. So that's going to tell you whenever you're harvesting grafts from the patient's own body, that's going to be a separate procedure you're going to be coding. The last one, guideline B4.4, says coronary arteries are classified as a single body part. Again, we're looking at character number 4. One code specifying multiple arteries is used when the same procedure is performed with the same device and the same qualifier. So really it's your device and your qualifier that's determining how many codes you're going to be using for a given procedure. So we've looked at our guidelines. We know which characters are impacted by those guidelines. So now let's look at the table. We know it's a med-surg section. We know it's the heart and great vessel body system, and we know the root operation is bypass. So we look at that table and we're going to say, what are the options for character number 4? That's the number of coronary arteries bypassed for each procedure. What are the options for character number 6, the device for each procedure? And what are the options for number 7 qualifier, which is bypassed from or the source of the blood for each procedure? Those are the 3 things we're going to be looking for when we read our operative report. This is the table we're going to be coding from, 021 table. You see where I have written under body part character number 4, the number of coronary arteries treated using the same approach. That's why it's significant. You need to always be looking at not just the number, but the approach and the device and the qualifier. Reading across the table there, under device, you see zooplastic tissue, autologous venous tissue, autologous arterial tissue, a synthetic substitute, a non-autologous tissue substitute, and no device. You see under no device where I have a little handwritten note reminding me if the left internal mammary artery, abbreviated LIMA, is used, there is no device because that artery is not disconnected from the body wall. We'll talk about that in a little more detail. I have a separate note to myself down under that column saying add a code for the procedure when harvesting a saphenous vein. That would be when harvesting any graft. You're going to be using a separate code. Back at the top under device, zooplastic tissue would be tissue from an animal. Autologous venous tissue would be the patient's own venous tissue. Autologous arterial tissue would be the patient's own arterial tissue. A synthetic substitute, just what it says. Non-autologous would be someone besides the patient donating their own tissue. So those are for bypass surgery, those are the things we're going to be looking at as far as grafts or devices to connect things. Under the bypassed from, character number 7, you can see we have the coronary artery, like another coronary artery, internal memory right or left, a thoracic artery, abdominal artery, and the aorta. Those are the main ones that are used for the source of blood in a bypass surgery. So your table itself gives you so much information of the kind of things you're going to be looking for when you code a bypass surgery. You will have to know your abbreviations. I've mentioned in previous podcasts that always have a notebook or some way, either electronically or a paper notebook, that you keep for lots of things, for abbreviations, for procedures, for special notes about different procedures, just because you're always learning and you're going to always be adding things to those notes as you go forward. So now we're going to start working through this procedure. We're going to highlight the procedures, including the approach for each one, and I'm going to highlight them with a different color so it helps me know what I'm looking at. The first one is a left internal memory artery to the left anterior descending. That's one bypass. The left radial artery graft from the aorta to the posterior descending. That's one bypass. Left greater saphenous vein graft from the aorta sequential to the diagonal to the obtuse. That's another procedure, but this time you're looking at two arteries, the diagonal and the obtuse marginal. Then you've got two grafts, the saphenous vein graft and the radial artery graft. And it tells you that those are going to be harvested in two different incisions, which they would have to be, because the saphenous vein is in the leg and the radial artery is in the arm. And both of those grafts are harvested using a percutaneous endoscopic approach. So you've got 5 procedures there that have to be coded. And I've listed them there for you, so then you just start coding them. The first one is the left internal memory artery to the left anterior descending. That's one coronary artery. We know it's an open approach. We know our root operation is a bypass. So then we start looking across. We've got to determine our device and our qualifier. The notes I have here for you are from your book. The left and right internal memory arteries are close to the heart. They normally supply blood to the chest wall, but those arteries can be detached from the chest wall and rerouted to send blood past an area of blockage. They are not disconnected from the body. So we do not code them as a device. We say no device in that 6th character position when an internal memory artery is used for that bypass procedure. And then for the 7th character, where's the blood coming from? It's coming from the left internal memory. So that is going to be your qualifier value, and that's a 9. So those 7 characters here, 02100Z9, is the procedure code for a left internal memory artery to a left anterior descending artery in a bypass. The second one, the radial artery graft, going from the aorta to the posterior descending artery, open approach. We go to the same table, looking at med-surg section, heart and great vessel body system, bypass surgery. The number of coronary arteries bypassed is 1. The approach is open. So then how do we look at our characters 6 and 7? The autologous arterial tissue. The radial artery, obviously arterial tissue, is the patient's own, so that makes it autologous. So our device is autologous arterial tissue, and bypassed from is the aorta. So that's our 7th character. Our PCS code for this part of the procedure, 02100AW. The next procedure is the saphenous vein graft, connecting the aorta to the diagonal and to the obtuse marginal. So that's 2 arteries. Open approach, bypass, and there's your table. Your device is autologous venous tissue because it's coming from the patient's own saphenous vein. And the source of the blood is the aorta. The code for this particular part of the procedure, 021109W. Now we're going to look at harvesting those 2 grafts. The first, the saphenous vein, is harvested with a percutaneous endoscopic approach. And you're not taking the entire vein, you're only taking a little piece of it for the graft. So that is an excision as your root operation. You've got no device and no qualifier. You're harvesting the radial artery for that other graft, percutaneous endoscopic approach, excision because you're only taking a little piece of the radial artery, not the entire thing. And there's your codes. So hopefully this walkthrough makes it a little bit easier for you to understand how you might approach an operative report for coding a bypass surgery. This would be true really in any surgery. You're going to step through it and see what would be coded and what would not be coded. Your guidelines often will help you know what is not coded in a given procedure. If you have any questions, please post them in the discussion board and I will address them there. Thank you so much and have a good day.